Get this piece of trash off my curb, now!
Holloway waved at the tow crew. They didn't ask questions. Chains hooked, car up. Adrian came running.
Hold on, that's my car. I have a valid permit?
Holloway spun around, his face lit up.
Well, well. Fletcher, so this is your ride, huh, snitch?
He grabbed Adrian's collar.
You snitched on me to Internal Affairs last year, remember? Almost cost me my badge.
Then he dragged him sideways and threw him onto the asphalt.
This is what you get, Fletcher. Remember my face.
Adrian's hands hit the ground, his jaw clenched. He didn't say a word. A few people stopped and stared. Nobody stepped in. Behind him, his car disappeared down the block. Holloway thought this was just payback, a petty win. He had no idea what Fletcher had become or what that one tow was about to cost him. Have you ever watched a man with a badge destroy his own career with one act of petty revenge because you are about to? Hit like, drop a comment, and let me take you back to where it all started. Adrian Fletcher wasn't born into power. He was born into plumbing. His father, Walter Fletcher, spent 31 years crawling under houses and unclogging pipes in South End, the kind of neighborhood where ambulances took their time and school buses skipped stops when it rained. Walter worked 2 shifts most days, the early one for a property management company, the late one freelance fixing toilets and leaky faucets for neighbors who paid him in cash and home-cooked plates. He never complained, not once. Not even when his knees started giving out at 45 or when the company passed him over for a promotion they gave to a 23-year-old white kid who couldn't tell a wrench from a socket. Adrian watched all of it. He watched his father come home at 11 at night, boots caked in mud hands, cracked and bleeding, and still sit down at the kitchen table to check Adrian's homework. He watched him iron his one good shirt every Sunday morning for church, the same shirt for 9 years straight. He watched him shake hands with men who talked down to him and smile at women who crossed the street when they saw him coming. And he watched his father give him a Seiko watch the day he graduated from law school. Not a Rolex, not a Tag Heuer. A Seiko silver face leather strap, $85 from the mall. Walter had saved for it for 4 months. Time is the only thing they can't take from you, Walter said, pressing the box into Adrian's hands. Don't ever let anyone waste yours. Adrian wore that watch every single day after that. Through the bar exam, through his first day at the district attorney's office, through every case, every trial, every late night, buried in files when the building was empty and the cleaning crew had gone home. He started at the bottom, junior prosecutor, the one who got the cases nobody wanted: shoplifting, petty vandalism, public intoxication. He didn't complain. He prepared every case like it was going to the Supreme Court. Witnesses prepped, evidence organized, arguments rehearsed in front of his bathroom mirror at 5 in the morning. His supervisors noticed, not because he was loud, because he was ready every single time. Junior prosecutor became assistant district attorney, then senior ADA, then chief deputy, the youngest in the office's history. And then 3 months ago, the election. Harris County had never elected a black district attorney, not in 160 years. Adrian ran on a platform of police accountability and criminal justice reform. Half the department endorsed his opponent. The police union spent $200,000 trying to bury him. Yard signs for the other candidate lined every block in the precinct neighborhoods. Adrian won by 11 points. The local news covered it for 2 days. Then the cycle moved on. A new DA wasn't exactly breaking news in a county where most people couldn't name the old one. Adrian didn't hold a press conference, didn't do a victory lap. He showed up on day 1 in the same white dress shirt and gray slacks he always wore, parked his beat-up 2016 Audi in the reserved spot at the courthouse, and got to work. No entourage, no driver, no fancy car. That was the point. Adrian believed that the moment you started looking like power, you stopped earning it. Holloway had no idea about any of this. The last time he dealt with Fletcher was a year ago, a traffic stop on Route 9. Adrian was driving home from the office, late, tired. Holloway pulled him over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, asked him to step out of the car, patted him down on the shoulder of the highway while trucks blew past at 60 miles an hour. Adrian didn't argue on the roadside. He took the ticket, went home, and the next morning he filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. Not because of the stop, because of what Holloway said during it. You people always drive like you stole something. The investigation took 3 months. IA found the stop was unjustified. Holloway received a written warning, the first mark on his record in 18 years. His captain pulled him aside and told him to let it go. Holloway didn't let it go. He memorized Fletcher's license plate. He told the Thursday night drinking crew that some uppity black guy almost ended his career over a traffic stop. He waited, and when he saw that Audi parked outside the courthouse on a Friday afternoon, he saw his chance. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to find out, was that the uppity black guy was now his boss's boss's boss. The man who could authorize investigations, press charges, and end careers with a single phone call. Adrian Fletcher wasn't the man Holloway pulled over on Route 9 a year ago. Not anymore. He was the district attorney of Harris County, and he was 3 days away from prosecuting the biggest police corruption case the county had ever seen. But right now, at this moment, he was sitting on a curb outside the courthouse, permit in his hand, scrapes on his palms. His father cracked Seco on his wrist, and he was making a decision. Garrett Holloway had been running the courthouse block for 11 of his 18 years on the force. Not officially. There was no assignment sheet that said, Holloway owns this corner. But everyone knew. The tow truck guys knew. The parking enforcement guys knew. The courthouse security guards who nodded at him every morning, they knew. This was his block, his rules, his curb. He'd built that reputation one ticket at a time, one tow at a time, one confrontation at a time with anyone who looked at him sideways or parked where he didn't think they should. He decided who stayed and who got dragged off the curb, and the people who stayed were the ones who looked like they belonged. Holloway had a system. He never wrote it down. He didn't have to. It lived in his gut, that feeling he got when a car didn't match the lot. Too old, too beat up, wrong plates, wrong neighborhood sticker, wrong driver. The wrong driver part was the one he never said out loud, but it was always there, sitting behind every decision like a shadow that moved with him. On this particular Friday afternoon, Holloway was leaning against his cruiser finishing a gas station coffee when he spotted the Audi. Dark gray, 2016 model. Scratch on the rear bumper, coffee-stained floor mats, the kind of car that screamed, I can barely afford the insurance. It was parked in a reserved space near the courthouse entrance, the good spot, the one close to the steps. Holloway walked over, looked at the plates, ran them through his phone. Adrian Fletcher. His stomach tightened, his jaw set. That name had been living rent-free in his head for 12 months. The guy who reported him. The complaint that sat on his captain's desk for 3 months. The written warning that went into his file, the first stain on an 18-year record. Every Thursday night at O'Malley's after the third beer, Holloway told the same story. Some uppity black guy pulled the race card on me over a routine stop. Almost ended my career. The other officers would shake their heads and mutter about how the system was rigged against cops. Holloway would finish his beer and stare at the wall and think about Fletcher's face. Now that face had a car, and that car was sitting on his block. He didn't think about it for long. He pulled out his radio and called Reyes at the tow yard. Got one for you at the courthouse. Gray Audi reserved spot near the steps. What's the violation? Holloway looked at the car. Valid permit on the windshield. No expired tags. No obstruction. Nothing. Blocking a fire lane, he said. It wasn't blocking a fire lane. The nearest fire lane was 40 feet away. But Reyes didn't check. Reyes never checked. Holloway called, Reyes came. That was how it worked. The tow truck arrived in 8 minutes. Holloway watched the crew back up, lower the arm, and hook the chains around the front axle. Metal scraped against asphalt. The Audi tilted forward, front wheels lifting off the ground like a dog being dragged by its leash. Holloway pulled out his phone, took a photo. The angle was perfect, the Audi dangling from the chains, the courthouse in the background, the sun catching the windshield just right. He opened the group chat. 6 officers. The Thursday crew. Guess whose car just got towed off my block? 3 replies in under a minute, laughing emojis. Thumbs up. One said, about time, Sarge. Holloway pocketed his phone and looked around. The block was his again. Clean. Correct. The way it was supposed to be. A courthouse security guard named Jennings had watched the whole thing from the top of the steps. He'd seen the permit on the windshield. He'd seen Holloway walk past it without a second glance. He'd seen the chains go on and the car go up. Jennings had been working the courthouse for 9 years. He'd seen Holloway do this before, not once, not twice, but enough times that he'd stopped counting. A black lawyer's sedan towed on a Tuesday. A Latino contractor's pickup dragged off on a Thursday. Always the same pattern. Always the same guy giving the order. Always the same excuse: fire lane obstruction, expired meter, and always the same result: the car was gone before the owner came back. Jennings never said anything. Not because he didn't care, because the last security guard who questioned one of Holloway's tows, a man named Derek Poole, was transferred to the night shift at the county records building within a week. No explanation, no hearing, just a new assignment slip in his mailbox and Holloway's grin in the parking lot the next morning. So Jennings watched. He adjusted his cap. He looked away. And he went back inside. Across the street at the bus stop, an elderly woman named Ruth sat on the bench with a grocery bag between her feet. She'd seen the cop lean against his car and snap photos of someone else's vehicle being towed. She'd seen him grin. She thought about saying something. She'd raised 3 sons, and she knew that look, that grin, the kind that came from a man who enjoyed hurting people smaller than him. But Ruth was 74. She had bad knees and a bus to catch and a lifetime of knowing when to stay quiet. She looked at the empty parking space where the Audi had been and shook her head. "Lord have mercy," she whispered to no one. The block was quiet now. The tow truck was gone. The chains were gone. The Audi was gone. All that was left was an empty curb and a man with a badge who thought he'd just won something. Holloway was still smiling when he heard the footsteps, fast, slapping against the pavement, getting closer. He turned and saw Fletcher running across the parking lot. White dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, files tucked under one arm, the same face from Route 9, the same face from the complaint, the same face that had kept Holloway up on more nights than he'd ever admit. "Hold on, that's my car. I have a valid permit." Holloway didn't let him finish. He stepped forward, grabbed Fletcher's collar, and pulled him close. Everything that happened next Holloway had rehearsed in his head 100 times. Every word, every move. This was the moment he'd been waiting for since that written warning landed on his record. "So this is your ride, huh, Big Mouth? You snitched on me to Internal Affairs last year, remember?" His grip tightened. "Almost cost me my badge." Then he dragged Adrian sideways and threw him onto the asphalt. He stood over him and pointed down. "This is what you get, Fletcher. Remember my face." Adrian's hands hit the ground. His jaw clenched. He didn't say a word. A woman across the street stopped walking. A courthouse clerk paused on the steps, briefcase in hand. 2 men at the bus stop turned around. A young woman in a second-floor office window, Denise Calloway, 26, administrative assistant, picked up her phone and started recording. Nobody intervened. Nobody called out. They just watched the way people always watch when a man with a badge does something ugly in broad daylight. The tow truck turned the corner. The Audi disappeared. Adrian sat on the curb, permit in his hand, scrapes on his palms. His father's Seiko, the one Walter saved 4 months to buy, had a fresh crack across the face. He looked at it for a long time. Then he stood up, brushed off his shirt, and started walking toward the precinct. The 14th precinct sat 6 blocks east of the courthouse, a squat brick building with narrow windows and a parking lot full of black and whites lined up like dominoes. The American flag out front hung limp in the afternoon heat. No wind, no shade, just concrete and silence. Adrian walked the entire 6 blocks. He didn't call a cab. He didn't call anyone. He walked, dress shirt untucked, now scrapes on his palms, still raw, his father's cracked Seiko ticking on his wrist like it was counting down to something. He pushed through the front door of the precinct and stepped up to the front desk. A young officer behind the counter, couldn't have been more than 24, looked up from his computer. "I need to speak with the commanding officer on duty," Adrian said. His voice was even, controlled. The kind of calm that doesn't come from being relaxed. The kind that comes from deciding not to explode. "Regarding an unlawful tow and assault by one of your sergeants, Garrett Holloway." The young officer blinked. He picked up the desk phone, pressed 3 buttons, and mumbled something Adrian couldn't hear. Then he set the phone down and said, "Have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Adrian didn't sit. He stood by the counter with his hands at his sides, palms still bleeding, and waited. He waited 11 minutes. Then the side door opened and Holloway walked out. Not a supervisor. Not a captain. Not internal affairs. Holloway. The same man who'd thrown him onto the asphalt 40 minutes ago. The same grin, The same Oakley sunglasses pushed up on his forehead, the same coffee-stained fingers wrapped around a fresh cup from the break room. "You've got to be kidding me." Holloway stopped in the doorway and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one from the gut, the kind that made his belly shake. "Fletcher, you followed me here?" Adrian didn't flinch. "I'm here to file a report and speak with your supervisor." "My supervisor?" Holloway took a sip of his coffee. Slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. "My supervisor's in a meeting. And even if he wasn't, you think he's going to take your side over mine?" He set the cup down on the front desk. "I've been here 18 years, Fletcher. 18. You're nobody. I'm requesting a formal—" "You're requesting nothing." Holloway stepped closer. The young officer behind the desk looked down at his keyboard. "You came to my block. You parked where you don't belong. I removed your vehicle. End of story. That tow was unlawful, and you know it." Something shifted in Holloway's face. The grin disappeared. His eyes went flat. Cold. The kind of look that came right before bad decisions. "You know what your problem is, Fletcher. You don't know when to quit. You didn't know last year. And you don't know now." He set his coffee down and stepped around the counter. "I gave you a chance to walk away at the courthouse. You didn't take it. So now you're here, in my house, making demands." He was close now, close enough for Adrian to see the veins in his neck pulsing. "And I don't like people who make demands in my house. I have a right to file a complaint, Sergeant. You have a right to shut your mouth." Holloway grabbed Adrian's shoulder, spun him around, and shoved him face first into the counter. The edge caught Adrian right below the ribs. The air left his lungs. Before he could breathe, Holloway had his arms behind his back. Click, click. The cuffs bit into his wrists, the same wrists that had been scraped raw on the asphalt an hour ago. Adrian's jaw locked, his eyes watered, but he didn't make a sound. "Resisting an officer," Holloway said loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Obstruction, trespassing on police property. I walked through the front door. And now you're walking to a holding cell." Holloway grabbed the chain between the cuffs and pulled Adrian upright. Then he marched him through the side door down a hallway that smelled like floor cleaner and burnt coffee past two officers who stepped aside without making eye contact and into a booking area with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. Adrian's mugshot was taken against a gray wall. Height marker behind his head. He stared into the camera with the same expression he wore in the courtroom, still measured, unreadable. The kind of face that gave nothing away. Holloway watched from the doorway, arms crossed, rocking on his heels. He was enjoying this, every second of it. This was better than the tow. Better than throwing Fletcher on the ground. This was the real payback. This was Fletcher, whoever he thought he was, standing in front of a booking camera like every other nobody who'd ever passed through this precinct. "Smile, Fletcher," Holloway said. "This one's going on my wall." Two officers at the far end of the room exchanged a glance. One of them, a woman mid-30s, name tag reading Ortiz, opened her mouth like she was about to say something. Then she closed it, looked away. Outside the precinct, Denise Calloway was standing on the sidewalk with her phone. She'd followed Adrian from the courthouse. She didn't know why exactly, instinct maybe, or the same sick feeling in her stomach that told her this wasn't over. She couldn't see inside, but she recorded the front of the building, the timestamp, and Holloway's cruiser parked sideways across two spots like he owned the lot. She posted the first clip on social media at 3:47 p.m. with 4 words, "This isn't right, watch." 14 people shared it in the first hour. By morning, it would be 2 million. But right now, Adrian Fletcher wasn't thinking about social media. He wasn't thinking about justice or revenge or his career. He was sitting on a metal bench in a holding cell, wrists raw, ribs bruised, staring at the cracked face of his father's watch. And the only thought in his head was something Walter told him 20 years ago on a night when Adrian came home with a black eye from a kid who called him a word he'd never heard before. "Don't swing when you're angry, son. Swing when you're ready." Adrian was almost ready. The holding cell was 8 feet by 6. Concrete walls painted the color of old teeth. A metal bench bolted to the floor. A steel toilet with no seat. One fluorescent tube overhead that flickered every 30 seconds like it was trying to die but couldn't. Adrian sat on that bench for 45 minutes before anyone came. He could hear Holloway through the wall, laughing, telling the story. Adrian couldn't make out every word, but he caught enough. Followed me to the precinct. Dumb enough to walk in here. Same guy from last year. The laughter came in waves. 2 voices, then 3. Then Holloway's the loudest, the longest. Adrian looked at his wrists. The skin underneath the cuff marks had turned purple. His ribs ached where the counter had caught him. His palms had stopped bleeding, but the scrapes had darkened tiny bits of gravel still embedded in the skin. He looked at the Seiko. The crack ran diagonally across the face, splitting the 2 and the 8, but the second hand was still moving, still ticking. Walter's watch didn't quit. Neither would he. The door to the holding area opened. Holloway walked in, carrying a clear plastic bag, Adrian's belongings. Phone, wallet, keys, a leather badge holder. He dumped everything onto the processing table like he was emptying a trash can. "Let's see what we got here." Holloway unzipped the wallet first. Driver's license, 2 credit cards, a photo of Walter in his work coveralls standing next to a young Adrian on the front porch of the South End house. Holloway held up the photo. "This, your daddy looks like a janitor." He tossed it back on the table. Then he picked up the phone. "Passcode." Adrian said nothing. "I said passcode." "You need a warrant for that, Sergeant." Holloway stared at him for 3 seconds. Then he set the phone down hard enough to make the table rattle. "Fine. We'll do this the long way." He reached for the leather badge holder, flipped it open. Inside was a laminated ID card, a county seal, a photo of Adrian, and 3 words printed in bold blue letters across the top. District Attorney, Harris County. Holloway looked at the card, then at Adrian, then back at the card. His fingers tightened around the edges. Then he laughed. "Where'd you buy this, the dollar store?" He held it up so the officer at the processing desk could see. "Look at this, Fletcher's got himself a fake DA badge, probably printed it at Kinko's." The officer, a heavy-set man named Briggs, leaned forward, squinted, and went very still. He didn't laugh. Holloway didn't notice. He tossed the badge holder onto the table with everything else. Add impersonating a public official to the charges. That ought to be good for another 6 months. "Sarge?" Briggs's voice was quiet. "Careful. That badge looks real." "It's not real. Look at him." Holloway gestured at Adrian sitting behind the bars in his wrinkled white shirt, scrapes on his hands, cuff marks on his wrists. "Does that look like a district attorney to you?" Briggs didn't answer. He picked up the badge holder and turned it over in his hands. The lamination was government grade. The seal was embossed, not printed, embossed. The ID number matched the format used by the county clerk's office. He'd processed enough real IDs to know the difference. "Sarge, I really think we should—" "Book him," Holloway said. "I'm going on break." He walked out of the processing area, through the hallway and into the break room, poured himself another coffee, sat down at the table where 3 other officers were eating sandwiches and scrolling their phones. "You won't believe what this guy had in his wallet," Holloway said, grinning. "A fake DA badge. I swear to God, these people will try anything." The officers chuckled. One of them shook his head. Another said, "The audacity." Back in the processing area, Briggs was standing very still, holding the badge holder under the fluorescent light like it was a piece of evidence from a crime scene. Because in a way it was. He set it down gently. Then he walked to the far corner of the room, pulled out his personal phone and opened his contacts. At the same time, in a small office 2 floors above, Officer Trent Wallace was staring at his computer screen. He'd been running the name Adrian Fletcher through the county database, something Holloway never bothered to do. The results had come back 4 minutes ago. Wallace had been sitting frozen ever since. Adrian Fletcher, age 38, Harris County District Attorney, appointed 3 months ago. Office 4th floor, Harris County Courthouse. Direct line to the chief judge. Wallace's mouth went dry. He thought about the mugshot they'd just taken, the cuffs, the charges, the tow. He thought about Holloway in the break room right now, laughing, drinking coffee, telling the story like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to him. Wallace picked up his personal phone. His hands were shaking. He scrolled to a number he'd never called before, a number every officer in the county had, but none of them ever used voluntarily. Raymond Holt, Chief of Police. The phone rang twice. "Chief Holt's office. This is Officer Trent Wallace, badge number 4412, 14th Precinct. His voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat. Sir, I need to speak with the chief directly. It's urgent. A pause, then, hold please. 15 seconds, the longest 15 seconds of Wallace's career. This is Holt. Chief, sir, I believe Sergeant Holloway has arrested the district attorney, Adrian Fletcher. He's currently in a holding cell at the 14th. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Then Raymond Holt said 5 words. Don't let anyone leave. The line went dead. Wallace set his phone down, leaned back in his chair, and stared at the ceiling. In the break room, Holloway was on his second cup, still laughing, still telling the story. He had no idea that the funniest afternoon of his life had just become the last afternoon of his career. 14 minutes after Wallace hung up the phone, 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot of the 14th precinct. They didn't use the visitor spots. They didn't circle the lot looking for spaces. They rolled in single file fast and parked diagonally across the front entrance like a wall. Engines cut. Doors opened. 6 people stepped out. Raymond Holt came first. Chief of Police, 23 years on the force, a man built like a refrigerator with a face that hadn't smiled since 2019. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He didn't walk, he moved. Like a man who had already decided exactly how the next 30 minutes were going to go. Behind him, Eleanor Graves, Chief Judge of Harris County. 61 years old, silver hair pulled back, tight reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She wore a gray suit that looked like it cost more than Holloway's car. Her expression was the kind of blank that scared people more than anger, the look of someone who had already done the math and didn't like the answer. 2 internal affairs investigators flanked them, younger, both in dark suits, carrying file folders and the particular tight-jawed expression of people who knew they were about to ruin someone's evening. And bringing up the rear, the county's legal counsel, a tall woman named Patricia Webb, who had a habit of saying nothing until everything she said became a problem for whoever she was looking at. They crossed the parking lot in formation. No words, no discussion. Just footsteps on concrete, and the sound of the precinct's front door opening like it had never been opened before. The young officer at the front desk, the same one who'd told Adrian to have a seat 2 hours ago, looked up from his computer and went white. He recognized the chief. Everyone recognized the chief. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Chief Holt, sir, where is Sergeant Holloway? Break room, sir? Down the hall, second. Holt was already walking. Graves followed. The IA investigators followed her. Patricia Webb closed the door behind them. In the break room, Holloway was leaning back in his chair, one boot crossed over the other, telling the story for the 4th time. The audience had grown 5 officers now, all grinning, all leaning in. Holloway was in the middle of the part about the fake badge. And he's got this little plastic ID that says District Attorney on it. I swear on my mother's grave the guy actually thought. The break room door opened. Raymond Holt filled the doorframe. Behind him, the silver hair and gray suit of Eleanor Graves. Behind her, 2 men in dark suits with folders in their hands. The room went silent. Not quiet silent. The kind of silence that comes with a drop in air pressure, the kind you can feel in your chest. One officer set his sandwich down mid-bite. Another stood up so quickly he knocked over his coffee. Holloway's boot slipped off his knee. He straightened up in his chair. Chief Holt. He tried a smile. It didn't land. What brings you down here on a Friday? Holt didn't answer the question. He didn't even look at Holloway when he spoke. He looked at the room. Clear out. Everyone. Now. 4 officers were through the door in 6 seconds. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway fast and uneven, the sound of men who wanted to be somewhere else immediately. Holloway sat alone at the break room table. Coffee cup in front of him. The grin was gone. In its place, something he hadn't felt in 18 years, uncertainty. Chief, if this is about the Fletcher thing, I can explain. The Fletcher thing. Graves stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You mean the man you towed, assaulted, handcuffed, and locked in a holding cell this afternoon? He was parked illegally, and he resisted. He was parked in a reserved space with a valid county permit. Graves removed her reading glasses from the chain and put them on a gesture that somehow made her look more dangerous. And he did not resist. I've already reviewed the booking footage. Ma'am, with all respect, I don't know who you... I'm Chief Judge Eleanor Graves, and the man in your holding cell is Adrian Fletcher, the District Attorney of Harris County. The words landed like concrete blocks dropped from a roof. Holloway's face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, and then finally too late fear. No. He's not the DA. I've known Fletcher for... You've known him for a year, Holt said. He's been the DA for 3 months. You would have known that if you'd spent 30 seconds on a computer instead of 18 years throwing your weight around. Holloway opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Release him, Holt said. Now. Holloway stood up. His legs felt wrong, heavy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. He walked down the hallway toward the holding cells. The same hallway he'd marched Adrian through 2 hours ago. The same fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But everything looked different now. His hands shook as he reached for the keys on his belt. He fumbled with the lock. It took him 3 tries to get the holding cell door open. Adrian was sitting on the metal bench. Same position, same expression. Hands folded in his lap, cracked Seiko on his wrist. He looked up at Holloway the way a man looks at weather, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just acknowledgement that it was happening. "You're free to go," Holloway said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Adrian stood up, slowly. He straightened his shirt, the white dress shirt that was now wrinkled, streaked with dirt from the asphalt, 1 button missing from where Holloway had grabbed the collar. He rolled his sleeves down. He adjusted the Seiko on his wrist. Then he walked past Holloway without looking at him, down the hallway, into the processing area. He picked up his belongings from the table phone wallet keys. Then he picked up the leather badge holder. The one Holloway had called a fake. The one he'd tossed on the table like garbage. Adrian opened it, looked at it for a moment, and slid it into his breast pocket. Graves was waiting for him in the hallway. She didn't say anything sympathetic. She didn't need to. She put her hand on his shoulder for exactly 2 seconds. Then she turned to Holt. Full investigation. Every complaint ever filed against Holloway. Every tow he's ever ordered. Every arrest. I want it on my desk Monday morning. Holt nodded once. Adrian walked toward the exit. His back was straight. His steps were even. He didn't look back. Not at Holloway. Not at the officers pressed against the walls. Not at Wallace, who stood in a doorway with tears running down his face. He pushed through the front door and stepped into the evening air. The sun was going down. The parking lot was full of SUVs that hadn't been there when he walked in 2 hours ago. He stood on the steps for a moment, adjusted his watch, took a breath. Then Adrian Fletcher, the district attorney of Harris County, walked out into the fading light, and the 14th precinct was never the same again. By Monday morning, the investigation was already ahead of schedule. Not because the internal affairs team was fast, because the evidence was everywhere. All they had to do was open the drawer. Holloway's personnel file was 6 inches thick. On the surface, it looked clean. 18 years, 3 service stripes, 2 commendations for traffic management, a certificate of appreciation from the county fair for outstanding community presence. The kind of file that HR would call exemplary. But underneath the commendations, buried in a folder marked "Resolved No Action," were 23 complaints. 23. The oldest was from 2008, a black schoolteacher named Gloria Haynes. She'd parked her Honda Civic in a metered spot downtown, paid meter-valid receipt on the dashboard. Holloway had her car towed anyway. When she came back and asked why, he told her the meter was broken. It wasn't. She filed a complaint. The complaint was reviewed by Holloway's shift captain at the time, a man named Patterson, who retired in 2015 and marked unfounded. The second complaint came 6 months later. A Latino nurse named Carlos Medina pulled over on his way home from a 12-hour shift at the county hospital. Holloway cited him for a broken tail light. The tail light worked fine. Medina's complaint was marked insufficient evidence. Then came 2009, 2010, 2011, 1 or 2 a year like clockwork. A college student cuffed for attitude. A delivery driver whose van was towed because it looked suspicious. A retired veteran who was told to go back where you came from during a routine stop. Each complaint followed the same path, filed, reviewed by a supervisor, buried. No discipline, no follow-up, no record that anyone had ever read them. 19 of the 23 complainants were black or Latino. The IA team put it in a chart. The chart looked like a target with Holloway's name at the center and every arrow pointing the same direction. By Tuesday afternoon, the chart was on Judge Graves's desk. By Wednesday morning, it was on the front page of the Harris County Tribune. The headline read, "Sergeant accused of arresting DA had 23 prior complaints, all buried." Then Denise Calloway's video dropped. She had 3 clips. The first shot from the courthouse sidewalk showed Holloway grabbing Adrian's collar and throwing him to the ground. The second, filmed from across the street as Adrian walked to the precinct, showed the scrapes on his palms and the cracked Seiko on his wrist. The third, recorded outside the precinct, showed Holloway's cruiser parked sideways across 2 spots and time-stamped 3:47 p.m., the same time Adrian was being booked inside. Denise posted them Thursday night with a caption that read, "He had a valid permit. He had a badge. He had every right to be there. None of it mattered." By Friday morning, the video had 2.3 million views. By Saturday, it was on national news. By Sunday, Holloway's name was a hashtag. Hashtag Holloway must go trended for 6 straight hours. The comments section became a confessional. People who'd never filed complaints because they didn't think anyone would listen started telling their stories. A woman in the next county said Holloway once told her to speak English or shut up during a traffic stop. A teenager said Holloway confiscated his skateboard and told him, "Your kind didn't belong on the courthouse sidewalk." A former officer anonymous posting from a burner account wrote, "Everyone at the 14th knew. Nobody said anything. That's the real crime." On Monday, 1 week after the tow chief Holt held a press conference, he stood behind a podium with the county seal and announced that Sergeant Garrett Holloway had been suspended without pay, effective immediately pending a full disciplinary review and criminal investigation. Holloway watched the press conference from his living room, alone. His wife had taken the kids to her mother's house 2 days earlier. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. The disciplinary hearing took place 3 weeks later in a room on the 4th floor of the county building, the same building where Adrian Fletcher's office was. The irony was lost on no one. Holloway sat at a table with a union lawyer who spent most of the hearing looking at his shoes. Across from them sat 2 IA investigators, the county's legal counsel, Patricia Webb, and a civilian oversight panel of 5 members who had reviewed every complaint, every tow record, every booking report Holloway had ever filed. The charges were read one by one: unlawful tow of a legally parked vehicle, assault on a county official, false arrest, filing fraudulent charges, resisting obstruction, and trespassing, none of which had any basis, abuse of authority, conduct unbecoming an officer, racial discrimination in the execution of duties. Holloway's lawyer objected twice. Both objections were overruled. When it was Holloway's turn to speak, he stood up, looked at the panel, and said, "I was doing my job." Nobody in the room moved. Nobody nodded. The panel chair, a retired school principal named Dorothy Sims, took off her glasses and said, "Sergeant Holloway, you weren't doing your job. You were doing whatever you wanted, and you did it for 18 years because nobody stopped you." The ruling was unanimous. Termination, effective immediately. Full loss of pension, 18 years of contributions gone. Recommendation for criminal prosecution on charges of unlawful arrest and assault. Holloway's badge was collected at the table. He unclipped it from his chest, the same badge he'd polished every morning for 18 years, and set it on the table without looking at it. His service weapon was surrendered. His keys, his radio. His Oakley sunglasses, which he'd left on the table beside his coffee cup. He walked out of the building through a side door. No escort, no handshake. No one said goodbye. Officer Trent Wallace was in the hallway when Holloway passed. They made eye contact for half a second. Holloway looked away first. Wallace had testified on day 2 of the hearing. He told the panel everything the phone call to halt the database search the moment he realized who was in the holding cell. When the panel asked him why he didn't confront Holloway directly, Wallace said, "Because I'd seen what happened to people who confronted him. They disappeared, transferred, buried. I didn't want to be next." The panel thanked him. 3 weeks later, Wallace was promoted to sergeant, the same rank Holloway had held. He was assigned to the courthouse block. On the other side of the building, in a courtroom on the 3rd floor, Adrian Fletcher was presenting the opening arguments of the police corruption case he'd been preparing the day his car was towed. One of the defendants, a lieutenant named Perkins, had been Holloway's drinking partner at O'Malley's every Thursday for 11 years. Adrian stood at the podium, white dress shirt, gray slacks, cracked Seiko on his wrist. He didn't mention Holloway. He didn't need to. Everyone in that courtroom already knew the story. The jury was seated. The judge nodded, and Adrian Fletcher began to speak. 6 months after the tow, Adrian Fletcher stood behind a podium in the Harris County Council chamber and introduced House Bill 4216, a piece of legislation that would later be known unofficially as the Fletcher Reform Act. The room was packed. County council members, police union representatives, journalists with cameras and recorders balanced on their knees. Civilians who had driven hours to be there, some of them holding printed copies of the bill they'd downloaded from the county website, paragraphs highlighted in yellow notes scribbled in the margins. 3 of Holloway's former victims sat in the front row. Gloria Haynes, the school teacher, whose Honda was towed in 2008. She was 61, now retired, wearing the same reading glasses she'd worn when she filed her complaint 14 years ago. The complaint that was marked unfounded. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and didn't blink when Adrian read the bill's first provision aloud. Carlos Medina, the nurse who was pulled over for a taillight that worked fine. He'd brought his daughter, a pre-med student at the state university. She was 22. She'd been 4 years old when her father came home from that traffic stop and told her mother that a cop had called him a name she was too young to hear. And Denise Calloway, the woman who recorded the video. She wasn't a victim of Holloway's. She was something else. She was the person who decided that what she saw from her office window wasn't something she could walk away from. She pressed record because she felt it in her gut, the same gut feeling that Holloway used to decide who belonged on his block, except hers pointed in the opposite direction. Adrian introduced the bill in plain language, no legal jargon, no political theater. He spoke the way his father spoke, direct, clear, like a man who respected your time. The Fletcher Reform Act had 4 provisions. Mandatory body cameras for all on-duty officers, no exceptions, no equipment malfunctions, no footage that mysteriously disappeared, an independent civilian oversight board with the power to review complaints, subpoena records, and recommend discipline, not a suggestion box, a board with teeth. A mandatory 48-hour review window for all towing orders, requiring photographic evidence of the violation before any vehicle could be removed, and a public database of officer complaints, searchable, updated, quarterly, available to anyone with an internet connection. The police union opposed every provision. They called it anti-law enforcement. They said it would make officers afraid to do their jobs. They spent $140,000 on a lobbying campaign to kill the bill before it reached a vote. The bill passed 9-3. Gloria Haynes cried quietly. She took off her glasses and pressed a tissue to her eyes and didn't make a sound. Carlos Medina put his arm around his daughter. Denise Calloway held up her phone and recorded the vote count, the same phone, the same steady hand. After the vote, a reporter asked Adrian how it felt to turn a personal humiliation into legislation that would change policing in the county. Adrian looked at the reporter for a moment. Then he said, "It wasn't personal. It was 23 people who filed complaints and were told their voices didn't matter. I just happened to be number 24. He walked out of the chamber. Same white shirt, same gray slacks, same cracked Seiko. Outside, the hallway was crowded with reporters and cameras. Adrian walked past all of them without stopping, but Denise Calloway was waiting by the elevator. She didn't have a microphone. She didn't have a press badge. She had the same phone she'd used that Friday afternoon at the courthouse. "Mr. Fletcher." Adrian stopped. "I just wanted to say I'm glad I pressed record." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, 23 people said something was wrong, and nobody listened. You pressed a button and the whole country heard it. Don't ever let anyone tell you that didn't matter." Denise nodded. She didn't cry. She just held her phone a little tighter and walked away. 3 floors below, in the same building, Garrett Holloway's name was being removed from the precinct roster. His locker at the 14th had already been emptied by someone else. His nameplate had been unscrewed from the breakroom door. The Oakley sunglasses he'd left on the table the day of the hearing had been put in a cardboard box with his coffee mug and a framed photo of his first day on the force 18 years and 40 pounds ago. Nobody claimed the box for 2 weeks. Eventually, a janitor moved it to the basement. Holloway had moved in with his brother in a town 40 miles north. He didn't talk about what happened. His brother's wife asked once over dinner, and Holloway left the table and didn't come back for 3 hours. He drove around in circles on county roads with the radio off, passing speed traps he used to run, passing intersections where he used to park his cruiser and watch the traffic flow like a man surveying a kingdom. The kingdom was gone now. The cruiser was gone. The badge was gone. The pension, 18 years of monthly deductions, 18 years of planning for a retirement on a lake somewhere, was gone. All that was left was a man in his brother's guest room staring at a ceiling fan, replaying the same moment over and over, the break room door opening Holt's face, and the 6 words that ended everything. The district attorney of Harris County. Back at the 14th Precinct, Sergeant Trent Wallace walked the courthouse block every morning. He checked permits before he wrote tickets. He looked at stickers before he called tow trucks. He said, "Good morning," to Jennings, the security guard, who now waved back instead of looking away. It was a small thing, but small things were how it had started in the first place, and small things were how it was going to change. Adrian drove home in his Audi, the one the county had retrieved from the impound lot the day after his arrest. It still had a scratch on the rear bumper. He never fixed it. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, the same table where Walter used to check his homework, and placed the Seiko face down on the wood. The crack across the glass caught the overhead light. He ran his thumb across it. He didn't fix that either. Some things are worth more broken. If this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a comment. Tell me, what would you have done if you were Adrian? Would you have stayed calm? Would you have swung I want to know?
Holloway lost his badge, his pension, 18 years gone, and Adrian. He walked into a courtroom wearing that cracked Seiko and changed the law. 23 people filed complaints against Holloway. 23, every single one was buried, and it took Adrian sitting on that cold bench, wrists bleeding, staring at his father's cracked watch, to finally break the cycle. But here's what gets me. Adrian didn't use his power to destroy Holloway. He used it to build something: body camera, a civilian oversight board, a public complaint database. He took the worst day of his life and turned it into protection for every person who'd never been towed, cuffed, or humiliated on Holloway's block. That's what Water meant when he said, "Don't swing when you are angry. Swing when you are ready." Being ready didn't mean hitting back. It meant building something that would stand long after Holloway's name was forgotten. So, here's what I want you to sit with tonight. If nobody ever sees what's done to you, did it still happen? And if you have the power to punish someone who hurt you, but you choose to protect strangers instead, what does that make you? What would it make you? Tell me in the comments. What would you have done in Adrian's shoes? If this one stayed with you, hit subscribe. The next story is even harder. Some things are worth more broken.